Hello, students. We are taking up the poem by W.B. Yeats, The Second Coming today. We look at a little overview of the background. In April 1936, 3 years before the death of W.B. Yeats, he received a letter from the writer Ethel Mannin. And Yeats was a Nobel Prize winner, so he was a poet of immense stature and influence. And she asked him to join a campaign to free a German pacifist by the Nazis. And he responded. Yeats responded instead of reading the recommendation. And he said that if you have my poems by you, look up a poem called The Second Coming. This was his answer. And it was written some 13 or 7, sorry, 16 or 17 years ago. And he foretold what was going to happen. And he said that I have written the same thing again and again since those times, and this will seem little to you with your strong political sense, practical sense, because it takes 50 years for a poet's weapon to influence the issue. So, this was the reply of W.B. Yeats to Mannin when she asked him to join a campaign against the German pacifist Nazis. He was very justified. WBS were very justified in taking a very long view because the poem was written in 1919 and it was published in 1920. And when we look at the poem The Second Coming, it is perhaps one of the most plundered poems in the English language because it's just a small poem of 164 words. Short and memorable enough because it is famous. It has dissembled into a very constituent parts by books, albums, movies, etc. a number of times, and many of his poems have contributed. Uh, these lines are have become popular, like "No Country for Old Men," "The Foul Rag," "The Bone Shop of the Heart." This poem, Second Coming, it consists of nothing but such lines because they are almost extremely popular. And someone, as a reader who might be reading it for the first time in 2020 also, might resemble that there are some apocryphal underpinnings which complain that Hamlet was nothing but a bunch of quotations because there are so many quotations from Hamlet which have been quoted often. So whether or not we say that Yeats was this was one of the greatest poems by Yeats, we can actually say that it has been very popular and far most the most useful of it. And since Auden has written a poem in memory of W.B. Yeats, the words of dead men are modified in the guts of the living. So, this is his indication towards his better poems, and particularly with reference to Second Coming, which is a sort of a legendary poem read any time into the history, a kind of a universal poem. 100 years later, also, when we read the poem, we have so many things to interpret and decipher as per our contemporariness. Now, before we begin the poem, we just have a quick look at the brief biography of W.B. Yeats. He was born in Dublin, Ireland, and he was the son of a well known Irish painter. And he spent his childhood in country Sligo, where his parents were raised, and in London. He returned to Dublin at the age of 15 to continue his education and study painting, but gradually he discovered that he preferred poetry. Because he was born into an Anglo Irish land owing class, so he became involved with some Celtic revival going on in Ireland, which was a movement against the cultural influences of English rule in Ireland during the Victorian period. And this sought to promote the spirit of Ireland's native heritage. Although Yeats never learned Irish Gaelic himself, he was writing at the turn of century which drew extensively from sources in Irish mythology and folklore, and he had a potent influence on his poetry, Irish revelry Maud Gonne, whom he met in 1889, who was a woman who was equally famous for her passionate nationalistic politics and her beauty. So, in 1903, she married another man and grew apart from Yeats, but she remained a powerful figure in his poetry throughout his life. W.B. Yeats was deeply involved in politics in Ireland, and in his 20s, Despite his independence from England, his verses or poems reflected a pessimism about the political situation in his country and rest of the Europe. This paralleled the increasing conservatism of his American counterparts in London with T.L.C. Eliot and Ezra Pound. After 1910, his works were strongly influenced by Ezra Pound, becoming more modern in its concision and imagery, but yet never abandoned the strict adherence to traditional verse forms. So he had a lifelong interest in mysticism and the occult, which was off putting to some kind of readers, but he remained uninhibited in advancing this idiosyncratic philosophy, and his poetry continued to grow stronger as he grew older. He was appointed a senator of the Irish Free State in 1922. He is remembered as an important cultural leader, as a major playwright, and one of the founders of famous Abbey Theatre in Dublin, as a very great poet in any language of the century. And he was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1923 and died in 1939 at the age of 73. Yeats began the second coming, the poem which we will read in our forthcoming sessions, during a very tense, eventful month of January 1919. The First World War was barely over, and the Russian Revolution 1917, which dismayed him, still unfolding while another was brewing on his doorstep. So on 21st January, the revolutionary Irish Parliament met in Dublin to declare independence, while in a query in Tipperary, members of the IRA killed two officers in the Royal Irish Constabulary. The birth of Yeats' daughter, Anne, in February was also frightened with danger during her pregnancy. His wife, with young wife Georgia, had been stricken by the Spanish flu that was burning throughout Europe. So these events conspired to put Yeats in a very acrobatic frame of mind. And he found certain metaphors to express in his poem The Second Coming via hundreds of automatic writing sessions. And Georgie convinced her husband that she was challenging the wisdom of controls and instructors, which was the spirit realm. But with these sessions, Yeats constructed a very elaborate world explaining system and eventually laid out a bewildering detail in his collection called Vision. And crucial to this poem, The Second Coming, was the symbol of the gyre, which is a very important symbol, the cone or the spiral, what we know as. And Yeats' conviction that history moved in 2000 year circles. So, this is a very contemporary and universal poem in this context because the age of Christ, 20 centuries of stony sleep, he says, was coming to an end. And a new era, an antithetical era of progress and reason, would begin with the birth of a rough beast in Bethlehem. This is what he believed. And early drafts of this poem illustrate that Yu's dedication to universalizing his message because he declares a specific reference to French Revolution, the First World War, and he replaces those terrestrial images of judges and tyrants with figures from dreams and myths. So, according to David Dawn, this productive vagueness makes the poem ever relevant. And in his drafts too, when Yeats was painstaking refinement in each line, say for example, all things have begun to break and fall apart, which was distilled into things fall apart. So this is how he drafted. The center has lost, he wrote earlier, becomes the center cannot hold. So the beast that has blandly set out for Bethlehem slouches instead. So in his final version, we see that every phrase is full of vigor and weight, and the poem is built to last because we know that this is one of the beautiful and the most inspiring, most relevant poems of the of centuries together. This poem was published in Nation and the Dial in November 1920, and Yeats' collection, Michael Roberts and the Dancer, but it did not attain the problematic ubiquity while sometime after the Second World War. In 1963, an aphoristic couplet about the best and the worst was enough because for a cliche to irritate the critic Raymond Williams, who said that the lines are regularly used as rhetorical tactics in the defense of anybody's sanity against anybody else's enthusiasm. This was his complaint because they were too much overquoted again and again. And one reason for the poem becoming very popular was that its supporting role in his influential masterpieces, because we know that Chinua Achebe, he uses the phrase things fall apart in his novel and enshrined it in the vocabulary of African independence. And in 1971, The Guardian, he observed that the title had become an African catastrophe because in one more essay called Collection Slouching Towards Bethlehem, similar effect in the US at the time of stomach churning flux also has been used by Didion. When he opens the box with the poem, because the lines were quoted like this: revertebrated in my inner ear as if they were surgically implanted there. So, this was the great influence. The only images against which much of it I was seeing and hearing and thinking seemed to make any pattern.